A very good day to you and welcome to the Game Changer program, proudly brought to you by the Education Coalition of Zimbabwe. We're in January and it's back to school season. And of course, as much as it's back to school season, we're also in the month of education, as of course we're celebrating the International Day of Education. African Union has declared this year as the Year of Education, and the theme is Educate an African Fit for the 21st Century. What does this actually mean? Well, according to them, it means building resilient education systems for increased access to inclusive, lifelong quality and relevant learning in Africa. Over the past decade, we've had serious challenges in our education system in Zimbabwe, regionally and globally. And of course, to join me for this conversation, I have with me Mr. Nhlizio, who is the programs manager at the Education Coalition of Zimbabwe, to unpack what this theme really means and what it means for us as Zimbabweans going forward. Mr. Nhlizio, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well. Compliments of the new year.
Yeah.
Yes. I see you're doing well. Are you excited for 2024?
Sure. Some of us started 2024 in November.
Oh, so. Fantastic. Which is a good thing. Yeah. So you hit the ground running.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So, Mr. Nhlizio, getting into today's very special day, International Day of Education, and Africa is actually declaring the year as the Year of Education. Why is this theme so relevant?
You mean the theme for the
African Union? Yes.
Yeah, it's quite relevant. Probably considering the challenge that the education sector in Africa is actually been facing, and I think it's time, the opportune time now for Africa to then solve the challenges that be there for the the education sector.
Right.
Yeah, we have failed the children in 2015 when we failed to achieve the MDGs. We have changed to the SDGs. And again, if you see the indications as Africa, we are again actually heading towards failing again to achieve the targets that we have actually set for ourselves under the UN, to say we are going to make sure that all learners are going to be accessing quality education by 2030. And if you look at the trajectory that Africa is taking, for us to achieve that agenda, we need to actually be investing more into education. We need to actually be investing more in terms of training teachers, quality teachers. Because for us to then produce quality education, we need to then have quality teachers. We need to invest more in making sure that we have got resources that go towards towards education. And if you see the trajectory of Africa, it's indicating otherwise, and it's quite important that the AU is declared in 2024 as the Year of Education. And there are a lot of actions that are there that the AU really want to do for us to then achieve the SDGs, and as well as the continental strategy for education, the CESA goals that Africa has actually set for itself. So it's quite significant, and it's good that we are talking about this on the International Day of Education.
I think that's quite interesting. You talk about a lot of things. 6 years in, and in 6 years, Agenda 2030 will be done, which means we need to actually achieve our SDGs before or in the year 2030. But the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres actually stated that globally education is in deep crisis. Obviously, we're looking at the wars, over 31,000 orphans in Gaza, looking at the war in Israel, we're looking at Ukraine, we're looking at Sudan, we're looking at, the crisis that's happening globally. And he also says the progress towards the attainment of SDGs, especially SDG 4 on education, is badly off track. What are your thoughts around this? Is this an achievable goal when we're looking at Agenda 2030?
It's quite achievable. if if the world come together and really, stop these wars.
Yeah.
I understand the theme for this year in terms of the International Day for Education is Learning for Peace.
Yes.
And, I think it's the right, theme, considering that there's war all over.
Yeah.
There's conflict all over, war in the Gaza, in Ukraine, now I've been reading that, it's extending to Iran, Iraq, Lebanon, and all of the Middle East. The challenge that they are actually affecting children in terms of their access to education. Not only looking at the Middle East, but also conflicts in Africa.
Yeah.
We talk of countries such as Mali, Burkina Faso, and so forth, where those coups have taken place, and the situation there is actually not conducive for learners to access education, especially for girls, because of the violence that is there, and because of religious fundamentalism in other countries. And once we then establish peace, then these learners can actually be able to access education and quality education for that matter.
Yeah.
I think it is quite attainable if the world come together and all world leaders prioritize education and prioritize the peace, because education should actually be bringing the peace, but it's happening otherwise. So we need world leaders to then come together and actually consider and discuss about these issues. Then that way we can actually achieve the 2030 agenda. But otherwise, if we don't do that, then it will remain a talk show. Then in 2030 we'll sit down again and
create more goals.
Spend taxpayers' money, create more goals that we did not meet. So, but also I think it is also time for Africa to really have a critical look at these goals. Because when they are set at UN level, and I think Africa has to say, are we in a position to attain these, or we are chewing too much that we cannot swallow? So we need to actually be setting our own goals. I think the first point is to look at our own continental goals, the sets of goals that we've set as Africa, to say, these are our goals in terms of, coming up with a strategy for education. And these goals are also closely related to the SDGs, because they also speak to, attainment of, quality education, access to quality education for boys and girls. And we need to then actually review our strategy to say, where are we, and actually have a deep conversation on where we are and how can we go forward to attain our goals.
That's fantastic. And of course, Mr. Ntlizio is saying that, look, we need a lasting quality education. But at the end of the day, maybe we need to be realistic and look at these goals from an African context. Well, after the short break, we'll continue this conversation as we look at girls and children from the poorest backgrounds, children with disabilities, and looking at some of these challenges. How far have we come as we come back home and look at the Zimbabwean context? We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to the Game Changer program, proudly brought to you by the Education Coalition of Zimbabwe. I'm Unique Zimuto, and of course today is the International Day of Education, as we're looking at how far we've come. So the global theme is learning for lasting peace. Why? Because we have wars that are ravaging our countries, our children, all over the world. I mean, in Gaza, you're looking at over 30,000 children that have been left orphaned, that have nowhere to go. What does that mean for the education sector in Gaza? But we're coming back home, as of course we've been discussing about the African Union's theme, looking at building resilient education systems for increased access to inclusive, lifelong, quality and relevant learning in Africa. Thank you so much for joining me yet again, Mr. Ntlizio. So we want to focus on, young people that are from the poorest backgrounds, especially girls, children with disabilities, and children on the move, such as forcibly displaced, that face difficulties in realizing their rights to education as we come back home. What can we say when we look at enhanced equitable access to quality education for this special group of children?
Let me say, our government has actually, made quite big strides in coming up with policies that then make sure that, this category of learners is actually protected, actually, access education.
Right.
But I always say that, the tragedy of Africa is coming up with very good policies that are then poorly implemented. The policies, yes, they are there, but the implementation part of it is lacking.
Yeah.
For example, let me give you an example of the issue to do with the pregnant girls. We've got, fantastic policies that are there. The Education Act speaks to it as amended in 2020. We have got, the ministry is talking of guidelines, is talking of education regulations that are yet to be gazetted now. These are all good policies that speak, to issues to making sure that girls who have fallen pregnant go back to school. We can speak of the inclusive education policy itself. It's still in draft form, yes, but also the Act speaks to the inclusive education.
Yeah.
All these are policies that are good that make sure that, even learners with disability do access education. But you see what, like I said, coming up with a policy is different from implementation.
Yeah.
The challenge now is in terms of the costs that are needed in implementing these policies. If we look at the investment, how much is invested into education by our government? Yes, of course, we can say the education sector is always actually getting a bigger budget when you look at which we analyze it with national budget. I think it's always number 2, number 3 somewhere there. But if you look at it, over 90% of those goes to salaries, and nothing is left for them to make sure that the policies are implemented.
Yeah.
Behavior change. For the teachers, for the educators, for the school management to understand these policies and and be able to then implement them. There's need for behavior change because we have been having teachers that are saying. I cannot handle a learner who is pregnant because I'm not a nurse.
Yeah.
So such type of behavior change and community awareness, is actually lacking because of lack of funding. So very good, fantastic policies.
Yeah.
But the implementation part is becoming a challenge. And once we improve on the implementing part, then we are able to achieve whatever we want to achieve by 2030 or by 2063 as the African Union, Agenda 2063.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I just want to go back to the capacitating issues, especially for our teachers. Are our teachers getting quality, capacity training programs whereby they understand the trajectory of where the Ministry of Education is trying to move with education in Zimbabwe? Or are they being left behind, as you said, whilst all the policies are being put in place?
Yeah, so you see, the challenge that is there is that, there are two ministries that are responsible for education.
Right.
You have the Minister of Higher and Tertiary Education, I think Science and Technology, I don't remember the other ones.
Yeah.
That is responsible for the training of teachers. Then you have got the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education that is supposed to then absorb and use the teachers, for the attainment of education. So you have the Minister of Primary and Secondary Education right now is reviewing its curricula. We are coming up with a new curricula from 2024 to 2030.
Right.
So once you have such a scenario, then what it means is there should be in-service training for the teachers that are already in service.
Yeah.
And what is lacking now are the funds to make sure that the teachers that are in service are capacitated on the new thrust of education.
Yeah.
And it becomes a challenge. And also you find that there's a mismatch, between what the teachers are being trained at higher and tertiary education and the mission and vision of the Minister of Primary and Secondary Education. And once you have that, then you have a challenge because you then don't produce a quality teacher that is then then, is supposed to be now, the Minister of Primary is talking of a facilitator, someone who facilitates knowledge, not someone who is out there to dish out knowledge. But the teacher is not trained in a way to understand that, I'm a facilitator of education.
Yeah.
So it becomes a problem. The teacher is not trained in issues to do with, digitalization, and we are moving towards digitalization. And that's what our learners should actually be taught. And the teacher is actually struggling even to use a laptop, then it becomes a problem.
I just want to go back to that. Earlier in 2023, I had a mentorship session with 50 girls where their teachers were also present as I was mentoring them around, the future being digital. And some of the teachers, say, this is such an important session, but we only get these workshops probably once every quarter or once a year. And we're not constantly being capacitated about digital. Yet these children are digital natives.
Yes.
So what does that mean? If a digital native, it's almost like I am Zimbabwean, but I can't speak Shona.
Yeah.
What does that mean if we're going back to the theme, Mr. Ntlizio, which says lifelong quality and educate an African fit for the 21st century. Let's reflect on the 21st century. What does that mean to you? What does the 21st century have to offer for the Zimbabwean child?
So you see, when we talk of the 21st century, of course, we cannot leave out digitalization.
Yeah.
We cannot leave out issues to do with artificial intelligence. But, the teacher is the one that should actually be equipping the learner about, where we are going. And, but if the teacher is not equipped then to give that knowledge to the learner, then it becomes a challenge. Because we are living in a digital era.
Yeah.
We are living in a digital era. And everything that is to do with education should actually be within the digital era.
Yes.
Yeah. So if the teacher, say in Chindambuya, does not even have electricity, how do you then make sure that we teach in a digital way?
Yeah.
If there is no internet connectivity itself, it becomes a challenge. So those are the challenges that are there to then say, are we going to produce a learner that is fit for the 21st century when we've got all these challenges? And it is always my plea with the government to say, let's resolve these challenges if we want to grow with others. Unless if we want to continue trailing Europe, trailing the Americas, then we can actually do what we are doing, because I don't see a serious political will to invest in the education sector. I don't see it. I don't see it in many countries. And most of the time, where the political will is there, we are failed by bureaucracy, that then fails to come up with innovative ways of raising finances to make sure that, all these things that we are talking about are actually achievable. Then, it becomes a problem. But I don't want to always, talk about problem, because we have actually, been talking about this problem and challenges. And we now all know that these are challenges. We know that, our schools are not connected.
Yes.
I think very few schools are connected. To those schools that are connected, challenges, with the price of data itself, schools are failing to afford data. So we need a lasting solution to these challenges, so that we come up with a learner that is fit for the 21st century. And for me, the first and foremost is actually to come up with innovative domestic financing models that our country can actually adopt to solve these challenges. And one of the solution is actually to try and tax our minerals towards education.
Yes.
We have got so many minerals, natural resources here that are being exploited by foreigners. And actually, we are doing the reverse as a government. We are giving, the foreigners tax holidays, rather than actually, tax it to say to them, if you want to come and mine our diamonds, then you have to actually, be paying a tax that goes towards education. I was hurt when I went to a certain school that is just 5 kilometers from the diamond mines in Chiazu. This school is so dilapidated, and just 5 kilometers they are the diamonds of the country that are being taken to other countries without actually developing our communities. Probably we need to go back and revise Mugabe's community share ownership schemes, and make sure that the community share ownership schemes contribute towards education.
Yeah, conversations that break my heart indeed. And I'm glad that we can have platforms that we can discuss these issues. In our last segment, we'll be looking at the relevance of learning in Africa. We just heard that the Ministry of Education is sitting down, creating a new curriculum that will move us forward as a nation. But what is the relevance, and are we moving forward instead of trailing behind the developed nations? We'll be right back. Welcome back to our last segment of the Game Changer program, proudly brought to you by the Education Coalition of Zimbabwe, right here on Heart and Soul Broadcasting Services. I am with Mr. Ntlizio, who is the programs manager at the Education Coalition of Zimbabwe. We've been talking about issues to do with policies versus capacitating teachers on the ground. We've also been talking about creating an African that is fit for the 21st century, or educating an African that is fit for the 21st century. And what does that mean to us? Well, in this last segment, we're going to be looking at, the relevance in learning in Zimbabwe and in Africa. Welcome back, Mr. Ntlizio.
Thank you.
So, you just mentioned about the new curriculum, which is fantastic. I don't know if that's fantastic. I don't know. Maybe you can guide.
I can tell you. I can tell you it's quite fantastic.
Okay.
But I can't speak to it right now.
Which is fine,
because it is still going through the process.
Exactly.
Let's go to cabinet.
Yes.
But I can tell you it's something.
It's a fantastic process.
Like I told you that Zimbabweans, we are good at producing good policies.
Yeah, definitely.
We'll see what goes in terms of the implementation.
Great. So I know you have been in the education sector for the past 15, 20 years. And from your experience and the lessons learned, especially post-COVID, can you match our education systems and relevance with what's happening out there? Because there are lots of conversations whereby it's almost as if we're living in our own space and we're not relating back to what's happening out there in the world.
Sure. Before I even go to the digital era, my wife works at a farm. She's a manager at a farm,
right?
And she's been taking students from universities on attachment, and she was saying, what is happening in the education sector, because you are producing graduates that can't even start a tractor. So you find that you get education that is theoretical, and it doesn't help you out there in terms of the practical, issues to do with sustainable development, because that is the goal of education, for us to get sustainable development. So there is actually, a mismatch between, the relevance of education and what we are producing in terms of graduates. I think we are producing so much graduates that are not, relevant to the industry, relevant to the digital era that we are living in. So you find that you have so many people that are educated, but they do not have the knowledge to apply to make sure that we get sustainable development. So that is a big challenge in terms of mostly the curricula. It remains, it has remained quite theoretical for quite a long time, and it has produced graduates that actually, when one graduates, the first thing is to say, who can help me, draft a CV for me to go and look for an employment in an era where we are saying, employment is scarce. So we need to start producing graduates that then say, this is my innovation. Can I get funding to then, actually, expand? Which is there in terms of policy, but in terms of implementation, it is actually, the other way around. I've seen so many learners that I'm speaking now. The O-level results are out. I've seen so many learners with someone with 20 subjects at A level, at O level, over 30 subjects, and so forth. that does not, it's so broad. It doesn't give you, an area where you focus. So this is my area, and I need to develop this area, and this is the skill that I'm getting out from this level with. So it becomes a challenge. And I think someone was asking me to say, career guidance still happening? And I was saying it's no longer necessary. What needs to happen is we need to teach our learners to be innovative.
Yeah.
We need to to teach our learners to be researchers, to solving challenges, because education should solve the challenges of the day, the challenges that are happening in the communities.
Yeah.
But we are producing, graduates that are failing to then, bring solutions to the challenge that we do have. But each year we are churning out, with thousands of graduates, and we still continue to face challenges.
Yeah.
I can tell you challenges in agriculture, but how many agricultural graduates are we producing each year?
Over 5,000.
Challenges in civil engineering.
Yeah.
I always ask, when I see, those civil engineers actually, putting patches in our road, you find that they put end, and you wonder, was this person actually, educated to do this,
Yeah.
or to do fembera or what? Yeah. So there's a mismatch between the graduates that we are producing and the skills that we require in the 21st century.
But, and that takes me back to the root of the challenge. You're saying that we're supposed to be churning out 21st century students that are able to
with
look
a 21st
around.
century mindset.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To look around in the community and say, what are the solutions that
Yes.
I'm able to give back?
Yes.
We're looking at fintech industries.
Yes.
Right now, I have two friends of mine who are now spraying farms with drones because they managed to, look
Yes.
beyond and look at technology. So you no longer need a tractor to spray,
True.
but you can use drones.
Yeah.
So who is to blame for our lagging behind in Africa? I mean, can we blame the students? Who is to blame? And where should we be getting all these lessons from?
We blame our governments. I just want to be straight with our governments.
Yeah.
Our governments, are not investing enough. When you're investing enough, you invest with your best brains.
Right.
You invest with your money.
Yeah.
And we have not really had, best brains that come in and actually, try and solve the challenge that we have in our education sector. And sometimes, those best brains, we because of political reasons, sometimes we close them out and they say, oh, let them do. But I tell you, there are some people out there who have got, the best brains when it comes to education. But because of our political systems in Africa, then we close them out because we fear sometimes that maybe they want to take power from us. So our government is solely to blame, because we should actually be bringing solutions to the challenge that we are facing as Africa, to the challenge that we are facing as Zimbabwe, and the education is the best country to do that. In terms of coming up with solutions. Once our education is not bringing solutions to the challenge that we are facing, then there's something that we're not doing quite well.
Yeah. Mr. Ntlizio, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. What are your last thoughts around the International Day of Education?
Thank you so much, Nick. I think for me, actually, is to encourage governments to seriously, invest in the education sector.
Yeah.
Finding innovative domestic ways of investing in the education sector, because all these challenges that we're talking about are emanating from challenges to do with financing. Once we have got the financing, then we'll have, I think we'll do the correct way.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, thank you to everyone who joined us on this Game Changer program. It definitely was a game changer, and I hope it shifted your mindset. What will it take for us as Zimbabweans and Africans to create 21st century students that are not looking at theory only, but that are coming back to the community to find solutions and build a way forward in terms of development, being at the forefront of development when it comes to our country. Remember, this program was proudly brought to you by the Education Coalition of Zimbabwe, and we'll see you next time.